and welcome back to the Amputee Angler, where today I'm going to be talking about slow jigging. Slow jigging, with the exception of tuna fishing here in the UK, is probably one of the most up and coming fishing practices in the entire UK. So many people are getting into it now, which is great to see. I get asked a lot of questions about it, how to do it, the rods, reels, etc. So I've put this guide together, and it is a guide, okay? It's not going to be fully comprehensive. It's going to be a basic start to finish to get those people who are maybe newer to it or not quite sure into the game and start catching these pollock and bass on, I think, one of the best ways to do so on these slow jigs. So if you're more experienced and you've got anything to add to this video, please do it in a constructive way, keyword constructive, in the comments, either on the Facebook or the YouTube, wherever you're seeing this. This is designed to help those beginners get from A to B to C with it. I'm not sitting here pretending to know it all. I'm just showing what I know of it and what I've learned, and hopefully it helps a few people out on the way. So, again, yeah, fish on. Yeah, fish on. Oh, look at that one. Oh, wow, that one's gone.
Whoa.
That's a better one.
Oh my God.
Slow jigging then started off as we know it now, with the light gear and the reels over in Japan in early 2000s, I think it was. They took this design, these bits of metal on the light gear, how to work it, and they've developed it. And if you're going to do anything after this video, do go and Google and search on YouTube for slow jigging Japan, that sort of stuff, because the guys out there are streets ahead at the minute. They are really on the top of their game with it. The idea of launching bits of metal down to the seabed and giving it a lift up has been around for ages. Those of us old enough, and there's people who are much older than me, I guess, would remember the old Perkin, the old cod Perkin feathers. Big lump of metal, big treble hook, maybe a set of feathers above it, and lifting it up with broom handle style rods. That's been taken by the Japanese, and now the Americans, the British, and all over the world really. And like anything in the UK, it's just been refined down to get as much sport as possible. So we're using really light rods, really light reels. The bits of metal have even scaled down, the braids, the lines, and we just get so much fun out of this fish now and this method, and it's just an all-round great way to fish for a whole host of species. And I'm going to show you a few bits and bobs now. Let's start with the jigs. Okay, let's talk jigs. As with anything in the lure fishing world, they are designed to catch anglers, I think, a lot more than they are fish. But there is a whole host of different designs. You have some long thin ones, you have shorter stumpy ones, some have a flat edge, some have a rounded edge. This is a sidewinder helm, sort of pyramid style on the back, a flat concaved edge there. This gives a nice flutter. Others will be darting, so as you lift them up, they will come down and dart like so. Others will drop straight up and down with a slight angle, southeast, southwest as it were. You name it, there is a different action for these jigs. The key thing though when choosing a jig is to try and get out of the colour focus. Everyone's got their favourite colours with the soft plastics and stuff like that. What you want to be looking for is the action. Get a few different actions in your arsenal, and then you've got something to switch up. Colours, yes, they play a part, but with the metals, we're looking for how they're going to act, and how one acts may not be switched on for the day, and you'll get another one that rolls or flutters, and that'll be what they want. So my suggestion here is to get a selection to have a different action as opposed to the colours. And that will give you a good arsenal to go out there and hit these wrecks and reefs with. Traditionally, we fish with a big ball lead, a wrecking boom, or maybe a freeway swivel, depending how you operate down your way. This is how I do it. That's a 10-ounce lead, big 12-inch plastic boom, beads, swivels. That will then go to a length of fluorocarbon up to 15 feet long, depending on your preference. But that's already a lot of gear there. Then that ends in a rhubarb and custard here in this case, 6-inch bit of rubber, and traditionally we would drop it down to the bottom, slowly or fast retrieve up, drop it down again, and that's about all we can do to change the action of that lure, is to increase or decrease the speeds. All of this here is in the water creating drag. The idea behind the slow jigs is to just have the jig direct, none of those booms, none of those big heavy leads. You're just going to have your jig attached to your line, and that's going to be up and down. But what you can do is change the height of your lift or your pitch. That will change the action. You can do short flicks, that's going to change the action, and you can do a combination of both. We can crank on the reels. all of the action that we do up here at the top of the boat will change how that jig operates. Of course, wounded bait fish, if you've got a single or a couple of fish on the wreck, how you act, they're going to have time to think about it. When you've got these down and there's competition, these get smashed almost as soon as they hit the bottom. It's absolutely brilliant and such good fun. And what you'll find is that as you are pitching that rod up and pitching that rod down, you're looking for the line to curl back up on the water. And what will happen is, as that's coming down, imitating the wounded bait fish, a bass or a pollock or a cod will hit it before that line has had time to get tight again, and you'll notice that you've got a load of slack line on top of the water. That's your cue to quickly reel in that slack, lift into the fish, and yeah, and you'll pick a lot of fish up on the drop. But unlike the traditional way, how you impact this, there's 3 or 4 or 5 different ways you can change the action of the jig just by what you do with the reels and rods. Oh, something had to go then. A little grab then. And again. Yep, fish on. Fish on. What happened there was I was lifting up and I saw that the line just gone slack. So instead of tightening up, the line just went really slack, which is a sign that a fish has picked it up on the drop. One of the common misconceptions about slow jigging, and you hear it all the time, you see it in the groups, and I was probably guilty of it myself, you know, a number of years ago. I was probably guilty of it myself, but you go, oh, it's only for slack water, small tides, and it's just not the case. If you know what you're doing, you can slow jig at most states of the tides. You just have to do a couple of things. One of those is to make sure, and this is probably one of the key takeaways I'm going to give you from this video, is that you are up and down with your jig, and that jig is vertical, and you are in direct contact with it at all times. I cannot stress how important that is enough. Starting off your drift, you're going to be in front of you here, flick the jig down tide of you, so up from the boat. As that jig is sinking down, your boat is drifting down with it. It hits the bottom just as you get level, or maybe slightly ahead, just as you get level, and then you can start your winding, and you are up and down in direct contact with that jig. If you let it go as you normally would do with your wreck and boom, you know, your normal setup, that jig is going to be away from you already when you're starting, and it's going to put a big bow in the line, and as you're pitching that rod up, all you'll end up doing is just taking the slack out of the line. You actually won't be getting any action on the jig, which is key with these bits of metal. If you're like that and you're away from the boat and you're doing that, that jig is not moving, wreck's coming in, your jig's not going up and down like you want it to, you've taken a little bit of slack but you haven't taken enough because you're away from the boat, you are ploughing into that wreck and you are losing bits of expensive metal really fast. Ask anyone who started off slow jigging, the first time they do it, they lose lots of jigs, it gets really frustrating. However, when you get good at it, it is absolutely deadly. When it gets too far away from you and you start thinking that you are not actioning on the jig as you should be, bomb it in nice and quick and just reset the process all again. Depending on the size of the wreck, you might get 2 or 3 goes over it. It's better to be up and down and working that jig properly than just working your line and you're smashing into that wreck. It gets expensive really, really fast. Let's quickly touch on the reels for slow jigging then. I use a Pen Fathom Low Profile 300. Absolutely lovely little reel. I really like this. It's not a traditional purist slow jig reel because this particular model has a level wind, so the line gets fed on nice and evenly for me. The reasoning behind not having that is that it affects the speed of the jig and the line peeling off the reel. But modern day reels, you can adjust the spool tensioner on this to make it so loose that there's no tension on it whatsoever. When you're playing the fish, I like my line to go on nice and evenly, as you can see it is with this one here. All I've done is I've taken the base model handle, which is a tiny little thing with 2 little handles on the end of it. I've bought an £8 power handle off of Temu or AliExpress. It just bolts on. Having that bigger handle there, it gives you much better play with the fish and it's much easier, I find. So if you're going to go for this, I do recommend swapping out the handle for a power handle. Loads of different models available, but what's key here is the speed. You want a 711, something like that, real high cranking, so every turn you're doing is cranking in a lot of line. Nice narrow spools. Don't be tempted to try and use your normal boat reels. It's just not the same. You're not going to get the same action or play the fish, because you actually play fish with the reel more than you do with a rod. So it's really important that you're getting the correct reel for the job. Quite expensive, the Fathoms, the low profiles. There are loads of other ones you can do. Like anything in fishing, you can spend as much or as little as you like. This one here is a Shimano Osha jigger, and this is some serious money. A really nice sleek looking reel, comes with a power handle already on it, so you can see that that's quite an important feature. This particular model has got a brake on it, so as you're letting the reel down, the braid down, you can apply a brake. The idea being is, as that line's going down and it forms a bow, putting that brake on just keeps it that bit tighter. As you're getting into the last few meters of the drop near the bottom, you let the brake go and it dives down and you go from there. This one particular one is a star drag. I like a lever drag myself, but really expensive reel, this one, really nice. And again, this one's only got a 6:4:1 ratio. I like a 7 myself, but really nice reels, and there's plenty of these about on the market to have a look at and play with. On those reels then, we're going to put braid and a short leader. Where this is different to a normal setup is everything is a lot thinner and a lot more thinking about how much resistance is going to be in that water. You don't want big thick lines, you don't want big long leaders. One of the key things you're going to need is some multicolored braid, Daiwa J braid or similar, something along those lines. The reason is it's marked every 10 meters, and you need to make a mental note of when that jig is hitting the bottom of the seabed or the wreck. Make a note of what colour you're on, and also then as you start pitching it up, if you start getting takes, have a mental note of what colour it is that you're getting these takes on, and then next drift round you can bring that straight up. I cannot stress how important and how much of a bit of a game changer really is multicoloured braid is for the thinking fisherman. And which is what you need to be doing when you're doing slow jigging. You need to be thinking about what that's doing, where the wreck is, where your angle of your line is. Having that multicoloured braid on there is just brilliant. And then where the difference is as well now is with the leaders. I've got 22 pound J braid on mine. I think it's Daiwa J braid. 22 pound. Normally I'll be fishing 35, 40 on my wrecking gear, and then you have a lighter leader, so that if you snap off into the wreck, the leader will part before your braid does, or your braid to leader knot. I've only got on here 22 pound braid, and then I use a 30 or I think it might be 28 actually, leader. However, whereas normally this would be up to 15 foot long, I normally fish about 7 to 8. We've only got about 2 foot there, because any longer than that, that resistance again, which is a word you're going to hear quite a lot in this slow jigging world, that resistance in that water, the more you add that thick mono to your line, the more that's going to cut in, and at depth it makes a big difference. You then have to start using heavier jigs, having to reset more because it's wafting down in the tide, the action is affected. But a short length or fluorocarbon leader, I like to use the Trilene Big Game or Seaguar personally, 2 foot long, that's it. This jig is not going to be down there in the wreck a lot of the time, it's going to be above it. The idea behind the leader is obviously resistance on chafing to the wrecks, the braids, the reefs. Keep it nice and short. It's stronger than your braid in this case, and I like to tie mine on with an Alberto knot, purely because it's quick and easy. You can improve it by putting a couple of half hitches on it, but it's nice and tiny. The favoured knot for most people is the FG knot. I'm cack-handed, I find that really fiddly. The Alberto knot is what I use. There is a big strength, not a big strength difference, there is a difference in having it. An FG knot is a lot stronger in tests, but the best knot in my view for braid to leader is one you can tie with 100% confidence that you've done it right, and it's quick and easy if you do snap off. The Alberto knot wins for me on that front for this particular method. Moving on to the rods, the other tool of the trade. Absolutely tiny, 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 really, really thin rods. Now, I'm lucky enough to have mine built by my friend John. Anyone who's followed the channel long enough knows that the Chinese Dragon builds my rods for me, but we import the blanks from America, and this is a Bushido blank, what they call a Bushido blank. Now, again, thinking about your normal traditional method, These rods are absolutely tiny compared to those, so light. By the end of the day, with this rod and reel, compared to the normal way of fishing, it's just night and day. It's more fun, it's much easier to walk about with, carry about, use, flicking those metals up all day. Absolutely real good fun. Difference being with these is they don't have much of a backbone in terms of power. So whereas with the other rods and with the big boat rods, you can really work a fish up if you need to, really lift into it and play it. That's not what these rods are for. It sounds silly to someone who doesn't know. These rods are not designed for really bullying a fish out of wrecks. They're designed to take the strain. They've got an all-through action. A lot of them, you can buy different types, but a lot of the work is done in the tip, and the playing of the fish is done on the reel, which is why they're so important, to have that high turn ratio and stuff like that. Do not be getting these big fish on and bullying these so hard, because you will just snap the rods. They come in power ratings, so you don't get a 1220, 612 or whatever it is. They come in power ratings, I think it's 0 to 7, I think. Here in the UK we only go up to a 4 really. We don't have any massive species that are going to warrant any more than that. And most people will use a 2. The ones I have are about a power 2, and that's rated to about 180 grams jigs, I think. And of course you can play big fish on that. A lot of people think, well, 180 grams, that's not a lot. That's just the jig weight that you can play with. You wouldn't want to be going and sticking a 400 gram jig on this because the rod won't take it. However, this will handle some really big fish. With your drag set, your reel, and the pressure in the rod, you can play up some absolute monsters on these, and they're really, really good fun. I like a spiral wrap eye. Now what that simply means is, traditionally, you think back to when you were kids and stuff, and you'd set your rod up, you'd put your 2 pieces together, you'd look down it to make sure all the eyes were straight and you could see through. These are 1-piece rods. The first 2 eyes, depending on the designs you get, are normally straight in line with the reel, and then the subsequent eyes after that actually start rotating around all the way around the rod until you get to the last eye, which is then straight again. And the reason being for that is twofold. One, it prevents tip wrap, what we call tip wrap, where the braid wraps around your eyes and it gets tangled around the end of your rod. That prevents that. The other reason is it helps even the load out on the rod when you're playing a fish. So if it's got straight eyes and you're holding your rod and you're playing the fish, as that fish is crashing and diving, your rod will naturally want to twist in your arms because the line's going straight through to your reel, and that's where the pressure is. So your rod will want to do that. With the twisted eyes, it loads the rod and the pressure from the fish in such a way that by the time it's got back round to your reel, all the load is done in the rod. So you haven't got that urge to try and twist your rod, your reel, sorry, and to hurt your wrists. And for that reason, spiral wrap eyes on a slow jigging rod for me that's what I look for now. I've just used them for so long and noticed such a big difference that's what I have. I'll try and put a video in here of what I mean because I'm a bit constricted here. But yeah, spiral wrap eyes, absolutely brilliant for slow jigging. That said, the Shimano rods here, I think this is a game slow J rod from Shimano. That is your traditional straight-eyed rod, and it's absolutely lovely rod. You don't have to have the spiral wrap, but for me I think it makes a big difference. Lengthwise, they normally come in a 6'4", I think it is, they start at, and they go all the way out to a 7'2", maybe even a bit longer. It's down to personal preference. There is a difference in how they react to the fish and how far out away from your boat you are and stuff like that. I like about a 6'8", that's just what mine are built at, and it's what I've got used to, but it is a bit of a preference thing. Depending on the action and the power rating of your rod, that will depend how also the length you have and decide that you feel comfortable with. Coming back to our jigs now then quickly. Simply, we have a large bit of metal, as we've already discussed, will vary in size, shape and colour. You'll have a solid eye at the top here, which is where the comes out the top of the jig. On that then, what we will have is a few simple components, and I'm going to do a video on how to attach these, as there is a different couple of ways of doing it. You'll have a set of hooks, and we'll talk about those in a minute. You'll have what they call a solid ring, which will go to then a split ring here, which sort of links it all together. And then I've then got a ball bearing swivel, which is key. Don't get your normal style barrel swivels. You'll need a ball bearing swivel because otherwise the other ones will rust up and seize up and it'll become a weak point. And all you're doing is you're either tying that directly to your fluorocarbon, or you can have another split ring on your line, but that's adding a bit more drag. I'm not a fan of that. And that there is how you will attach that jig. And it all links together by that split ring there. There are different methods of doing this. The split ring is essentially the weak link in all this. And by connecting up to the swivel, we are putting ourselves at risk that if that weak link goes, we're going to lose the fish, we're going to lose the jig, and we're only going to come back with a swivel. However, here in the UK, we don't have any monsters. Well, we have tuna now. However, I don't think there's too many people slow jigging for tuna at the minute. So I don't think that split ring, these are a couple of £100 ratings. We're not going to snap off on that. The other way of doing it, I'll cover in another video, but there's a couple of bits of doing it. The reason for having that swivel on is it allows your jig to twist. Now these are designed to dart about anyway, so having that extra movement isn't going to be a problem. If you tie that direct without a swivel, or you clip it onto like a breakaway quick link or something like that, you will end up spinning your line up, and it'll go all the way through your fluorocarbon, all the way through your expensive braid, and you will see line twist. And I'll put a picture in now of that I had on mine, because the last trip out I was just using a quick link just because I had it in my pocket. I forgot my swivels. But by putting that swivel on there, that allows that to twist. It completely eliminates that, and it saves your nice expensive fluoro and your braid, and make sure you're getting that correct action on that jig. Some slow jigs will come with the assist hooks already attached. Others it will come just as they're, like just with the weight, the actual body. So you may need to buy that. So before you go buying slow jigs, make sure you got the correct hooks for it. They come in pairs. Common misconception that I see with slow jigging, probably one of the most beginner mistakes I would say, is people have a tendency to want the hooks at the bottom just because we're fishermen and we're used to having hooks at the end, not at the top, and they hook the jig up like that, and that's how they work the jig. It's not how it goes, guys. Connect it up at the top like that, so the hooks are hanging down the side. As the fish grab the jigs, that hooks them there. They normally come in pairs, either in line like that together, or they will be asymmetrical, so they will be opposite facing like that. All personal preference. But on a smaller jig like this, I would just have the hooks at the top. If I have a longer jig, like a Loki for instance, a sidewinder Loki, they're a lot longer. I will add a single hook at the other end of the jig, because what will happen is sometimes on the bigger jigs, as this falls, the fish will grab the end of the jig that hasn't got a hook. And bass especially, they like to hit these things 2 or 3 times sometimes, once to stun it with the gill plate, and then they come back round again. So if you've got a really long jig, it's worth putting a set of hooks on the bottom as well. Don't be sticking trebles on. If you start dropping treble hooks down into wrecks, you're going to start losing more jigs than you care to wish for. With these, if you snag up into the wreck, what you can actually do, because of the action of the weight and the jig, you can actually, rather than just yank it sharply, give it a couple of short bounces, and more often than not this will actually bounce out, and then you can quickly bomb it up a few more turns to get it away from the wreck. But yeah, hooks, top of the jig, like that, and that's how they sit. They do say as well that you want the gauge of your hook not much thicker than the lure itself, and you can see here, this is the sidewinder helm. The width of the hook is actually the width of the jig pretty much. If you have a hook that's much bigger, then what it can do is it can actually hook up behind the metal like that. So make sure if you're buying your own hooks to put on your jigs, that you are choosing the correct sizes for that jig. On hooks as well, this is some here. Again, these come from Japan, they are the kiddies. They come ready rigged like that half the time, or you can make your own, and again I'll do a video on that at some point. But they come in pairs with a solid ring at the top, and then you just use the split ring that I showed you earlier to attach it all together, and that's how it all links in. You'll get 2 sizes or 2 numbers with hooks normally when you're looking on the website. You'll get your traditional 10, 20, 30 hook size, and then you'll get another number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. What that number is the length of the cord that the hook is attached to. So if you've only got a 102, that's a 10 hook with a 2 centimetre length of cord, and obviously that's going to affect how much that hangs down onto your jig. A 3 will be a 3 centimetres, a 4 will be a 4 centimetres, and so on, so on. And again, you need to make sure that you're matching that up to the length of your jig, because if you've got a nice long jig and you've only got a 1 centimetre hook length, you're going to be getting loads of hits and no hookups. So that covers the hooks. Razor sharp. Having a hook sharpening tool on board is quite key, not key, a top tip as it was, because these do snag up in the wreck occasionally. You do bang into some hard mouth fish. A quick tweak with the hook sharpener and these hooks come right as rain again. A couple of accessories you might want to think about. Definitely key is a set of split ring pliers. Now you can spend £2 on some AliExpress jobs, or you can go and spend up to £100 on some proper ones. I think these ones are mid-range, they're about 30 quid, these ones. Now, people will say that split ring pliers do split rings, that it's irrelevant, £2 or £100. But having used these expensive ones, or more expensive ones, it is a lot easier. You can do it with the cheap ones, and it is only to open a split ring up, so it'll be personal preference. But the better ones, they do make a big difference in how quickly you can change those jigs out. Other items is a rig roll, a roll to keep your jigs in. These are only 6 or 8 quid off Amazon. I'll put a link in the description for you. You can go and spend hundreds of pounds on nice boxes and fancy rig wallets. I don't really bother with that. If it holds my jigs well, I don't care whether that's 6 quid or whatever. There's some places I will spend money on and I won't scrimp on. Storing my jigs isn't one of them. 6, 8 quid, maybe 10, but yeah, I'll put a link in the below. Other than that, you're going to want some new split rings, some solid rings. I've got a number, I keep a number of different ones with me, because if you need to change something out, the last thing you want to do is get out to where you're going and then realise you haven't got all the rest of the parts to be able to carry on slow jigging. So a nice selection of split rings and solid rings. I've got traditional round split rings like that, and I've got my solid rings as well. People will say that when you're attaching your jigs up with a split ring obviously is in 2 bits and it has a sharp edge. If you're finding that it's rubbing on your leaders or you're having a problem with it, these ones here, they're pear-shaped. This isn't a split ring, this is a solid ring that you can attach to your line that can then have everything attached to it with. Those ones there are the pear-shaped. Because they've got that bit at the top, there is no sharp edges, it's completely rounded. So they're quite handy to have as well, I've found. But other than that, a selection of split rings, a selection of solid rings. You've got your jigs, you've got your pliers, you've got your rods, reels. You're good to go out and enjoy these really hard fighting fish on the best gear and method possible, I think, here in the UK. Knowing how your jig works is probably another one of the most important things that you can be putting practice in. You can see how a jig works either in the marina or the harbour before you go out. If you've bought a set of new jigs and you're not sure how they're working, clip them on, get them worked on the side of the boat there, have a look at the action, do your different techniques. So do a slow lift, do a short lift, do a couple of reel cranks, see what gets the best action on that jig, make a mental note of it. Do that with all your jigs, and then you're going out to where you're going knowing how that jig you're clipping on is going to work and how it works when you do different techniques. Really key. If you don't know how your jigs are working, you're not going to work them to the best of their ability, and you're not going to catch the fish that you can catch with these. If you're just working a jig that's designed to be worked hard, if you're working it really slow, all you're doing is just towing that bit of metal up and down like that. If you put the right action on it, you'll find that it starts darting, starts fluttering. You've really got to know what's going on. The key with slow jigging is to visualise what that jig is doing down there on the bottom and putting the best action in it in order to get those fish that are looking at it to trigger to hit that jig. Because if you're not triggering those fish, you're not catching fish. Plain and simple. So make sure you know how those jigs are working before you set off on your travels. Well, that has been a quick basic beginner's guide. I hope you've got some use from that. I'm going to be doing a lot more slow jigging on my channel. There will be other videos here, if not now, in the future, on how to rig these up properly, 3 or 4 different ways to rig them up, etc, etc. So do keep an eye out for those. And in the meantime, if you've got any questions on slow jigging, anything to add, please do. And I will see you all again in the next video.